welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my special guest, Joe Krausman, our local Yiddish or Jewish expert. Joe, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me, Rabbi Simon.
Listen, we're going to talk about the language of Jewish or Yiddish.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into it, because I'll tell you the truth, you meet a good few people, of course, as a rabbi I do, and very few people know Yiddish or even an expert in Yiddish. Maybe they can talk a few words in it. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into Yiddish.
Well, my parents came from Europe and they spoke to each other in Yiddish. The children, me, my sister, my brother, would answer in English, and they'd speak to us usually in English, but sometimes they'd speak to us in both Yiddish and English. And basically, my uncle was a Yiddish writer, and I had some of his books, and I found it in the New York Public Library and in some other libraries, so I wanted to be able to read it better. So what I did is I made an effort to learn it. One thing I did is a thing called Yiddish Vach, which was run by Mordechai Schechter, one of the great Yiddishists. This is about him, and he was published of Afid Shvel, which means on the crossroads. All his kids speak Yiddish, and he was a professor at Columbia. He has a PhD in Yiddish verbs, of all places, that he got in Vienna, and it's so I have and he was a great Yiddish teacher. And in Yiddish Vach, you weren't allowed to speak anything but Yiddish, and there were beginners and there were great teachers. Also, there was a program in Oxford in England run by David Katz and Yitzchak Naborsky, two noted Yiddishists, and I went there and I was in the advanced Yiddish course there.
You were that good?
Not that good, but I knew enough. There was beginners, basic, advanced, and super duper advanced. So I was, and both teachers are renowned Yiddish scholars. One was Yitzchak Naborsky, who teaches now in Paris, and David Katz, who started a program in Vilna in Lithuania, and he teaches there in Vilnius every year in Lithuania. So I was fortunate to have good teachers. There was another program which I was at this year was in the Workman's Circle in a place called Hopewell Junction, New York. Now,
where is that?
That's in the bottom of Dutchess County. Now, Yiddish Vach used to be in Workman's Circle, but it's not kosher. So they switched it to Kopek. In fact, one of Mordechai Schechter's son-in-law was a guy from India who became ultra frum, and he's a professor of economics, but tzitzis, beer, the whole thing, and he wouldn't even eat a lot of the kosher food because it wasn't kosher enough. And all the children follow the dietary laws. One of his grandsons owns Yiddish Farm, runs Yiddish Farm, which is in not far from the Catskills, and every year we're supposed to speak only in Yiddish.
And what do they have programs?
They have programs where it's mostly young kids, and they farm in Yiddish. They have a sheikhet there who kills the chickens, and everything is in Yiddish. And these are young people. These are people in the 20s and 30s. In fact, the thing called Jugend Truff was Youth for Yiddish, but it had people from 2 months old to 90. Youth for Yiddish wasn't only young people, and not everybody there was Jewish. I mean,
that's a little bit funny.
Yeah, Dorothea Greve, who teaches in Hamburg in Germany, is not Jewish, but she can sing My Yiddish Mama like a pro. There's a Christopher Hutton who got a PhD in Yiddish from all places, from Oxford. You get a PhD in Yiddish from Oxford, Go British and learn Yiddish. So, and there were other people there, and there were 6 German Christians who were there, and they were interested linguistically from a German point of view. Yiddish is very interesting because the base language is Germanic.
That's what I was going to ask you. Why don't you tell our audience what the Yiddish language, or the history of it, what it is?
Yeah, well, it's basically, there's disagreements about what it is. I mean, in 12th or 13th century, German Jews had their own dialect. Now, I wouldn't even call it that. It's a bona fide language. And there are maybe, according to some, 12,000 Hebrew words in Yiddish, which is just as Yiddish as anything else. It's a fusion language, just like English. For example, you could say, this is my finger, das ist mein Finger. It sounds very, very German. You say, this digit is my... Digit doesn't sound German. Okay, I broke my knee, brechen, Knie. I fractured my femur. So one would be a Latinate, both correct in English, but in the same thing in Yiddish. You could use certain words. War is a Milchama, but you could also say Krieg is in the Krieg gefangen. Okay, Milchama. However, you can't say, for perhaps, the Yiddish word is Efsha. Vielleicht, absolutely not. That's not a Yiddish word. So certain Hebraic words are bona fide Yiddish. Certain Germanic words are absolutely not. In fact, they would call them Deutschmerisms. Mordechai Schechter would say you can't say ich will heiraten, which would be German. He said, no good. You have to say chasna haben, chasna haben. And there are thousands of words, particularly if it relates to anything religious, a levaya, smicha.
I should translate for the audience.
Okay.
Okay,
Machaya means pleasant, or for example, chasna haben means getting married. Those are called periphrastic words, but part of it is Germanic. Haben, chasna is the Hebraic part. Say there are a lot of Rachmanis. Rach means mercy. Haben is have, so but that's a word. Rachmanis. I had a lot of pity on him, and there were also words of smicha and so on. Where a rabbi has a haskama, that he gives certification. So basically, there are. And one of the problems for people who are beginners, it's even in this thing, often Shvel, that the Hebrew words have a different spelling system. In other words, if you spelled MS in modern Hebrew, or Ivrit, it would be Emet. It has an Aleph, Mem, and a Suf, which is, those letters only appear in words of Hebrew derivation. So if someone was thinking MS, they would say Ayin, which is Mem, Samach. The other letter, the Suf, doesn't exist in Hebrew, doesn't exist in Yiddish words unless they're from Hebrew. So if you see a word ends in that letter, or a ches, will be called chet. If it begins with that, it means of Hebrew derivation. So it's very difficult for people who are learning the Hebrew words is a big problem. So,
but a lot of the Hebrew, I've talked to, it's very interesting, to Yiddish people, and they don't use these Hebrew words.
Well, you almost have
over here, like milchama. They don't say. Some people do, and real Yiddish would.
You can from milchama you could say, but the German word for perhaps is vielleicht. That's absolutely not Yiddish. You say efsha, which is from a Hebrew. Yeah. And certain other words, you can say a cemetery is a base oilum, and you whatever the German word is, I can't think of it now, but that's the word. You can't say the German word. Also, Sie, haben Sie, that's definitely not Yiddish. Was machst du? Du in the ear is it's du and Sie in German. The ear is the word for the proper. Now, remember, someone said to, who's a great scholar, to Mordechai Schechter, I knew that was wrong, was machst du? To a guy who's a world-renowned scholar or a rabbi of note, you don't say that. It's too familiar. You say, was macht so
I know exactly what you're saying, of course, but I just want our viewers, you're going a little too fast for them.
Okay.
That in English, you could say, how are you doing? And you could say, if you're friendly with a macher, a president of the United States, hey, President, how you doing?
Yeah.
And I'd say to you, Joe, hey, how you doing? And in most languages, it's not just
it's a
in
formal.
Yiddish, it's very formal. So there's a special word for you if he's a special person.
And in terms of someone who's of a higher rank, you would use the word ear. And when someone said it, he didn't say it, but it's considered rude to use it. So, but you have to know. As we say, medafis, and if you have to know, and if you make an error, it's okay. But basically, the problem that a lot of learners have is with the Hebrew component. So in a lot of dictionaries, the great Weinreich dictionary will have transliterated the Hebrew words because you wouldn't know how to pronounce them if you were using the regular script that's used for real words that stem from Germanic. So it's a problem because they say it's a fusion language, and also there are a lot of words that stem from Slavic. You can see the word like nudnik, nudne, zaraza. There's certain words, certain things. Berries, ayagadis. That's not Germanic. That's not Hebrew, and so that's Slavic.
So that's what I was going to ask you. That the Yiddish is not you could say a fusion between German and Hebrew.
Mostly, and it has the Slavic terms thrown in too.
So I mean, you say it's totally improper for a pure Yiddishist to speak German. But they use so many different languages in it anyway.
Yeah, but certain things. I mean, you say, ich bin in German. Ich bin a Yid. Okay, but you can't. That's very Germanic. Just like in English, you could say, "This is my finger." What's the German word for finger? This is das. Ist. This is common. So you. But the Hebraic content is very big. Estimate 13,000 words. And in certain places, you won't use what we call a Deutschmerism because it's just not Yiddish. I mean, there's a totally great grammar book. In fact, Dr. Schechter wrote a grammar book, and there's proper and improper Yiddish. But even people who speak English will make errors, and as long as you're understood, you can live with some errors. Who and whom, even though use it here or there, or technically, you would say this is she because technically, a copulative verb doesn't take an object. This is she. Who is knocking? Who is it? It's me. Technically, that was incorrect. Now it's kind of changed, but basically. When I worked in a theater, and this is she, it almost sounded odd, but technically that's correct. But now you use it. I'm not going to do it. My mother says, "Who is it?" It's me. So the language evolved. It's okay now. So over time, it was thee and thou was the word. You don't use that now in English either. So Yiddish has changed a bit, but basically it's a bona fide language, and if you said to Yiddish is just a dialect, they go through the wall. It's a bona fide language. It has a grammar, it has a spelling, it has things.
But for these Yiddishists, or for at a university level? At
a university level, where you can study, as I said, at Harvard, at Indiana, at the City College, at the University of Texas. In fact, the guy who was the big teacher there wasn't Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish to speak Yiddish. Interesting. A few months ago in New York, Shane Baker, who's an Episcopalian, studied Yiddish. His Yiddish is absolutely flawless. He did the play Waiting for Godot in an Irish film festival in Yiddish. And people said it sounded better in Yiddish than it did in English. I saw it in New York, and he did it in Yiddish. He translated it. His Yiddish is absolutely flawless. And now they're doing in October in New York the play by Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman, in Yiddish. Now, you're right, Rabbi Simon, because most people don't know the language, so they do it with English titles.
Subtitles.
With subtitles. Now, in the old days, when Yiddish was a major language, unfortunately, as we all know, the Holocaust killed many of the Yiddish speakers, so there were about a huge number of Yiddish theaters where you didn't need subtitles because those people were Yiddish speakers. They do right at the bat. Now, anytime they do anything as a folk speaker, it has to have titles because most people wouldn't know it. And people who are very orthodox say Satmar, they won't go to the theater. Just like because they have.
Do you have any numbers, like of how many Yiddish speakers were before the Holocaust? Or how many people speak Yiddish today?
Well, I don't know, but I've heard that there were. I don't know. Well, Hasidim. Let me ask you a question. With the Lubavitcher, the number that speak Yiddish is going down. Am I right in that?
a little bit because you have. It's because the Orthodox, of course, many of them live in Israel,
Right,
and
and then
obviously
speaking it-
Israel Hebrew is
Yeah.
the official language, and a lot of people are Sephardim.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of people coming
So
in
they never
from
spoke
around.
Yiddish.
Yeah, so they don't come to it. Now the Rebbe's writings
Were in Yiddish.
he spoke in Yiddish and they wrote it down in Yiddish.
Yes.
But now again, like you're
look
saying,
at-
they translate everything into Hebrew for these people.
Right.
So I don't know if it's down because there's just this tremendous growth in the Hasidic world.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's down, but it's not universal.
Yeah.
Let's say that. So if you just say, "Oh, you're a Lubavitcher," of course you speak Yiddish. You're a Chassid,
Not
right?
necessarily.
It's I wouldn't
And
say
I
that.
think where it's the first language mostly is among the Satmar Hasidim in Kiryas Joel. They speak. I've seen groups of them here, and they speak to the kids almost like a Hungarian Yiddish. And they speak, I think, am I right on that? I'm not sure. But mostly in the Satmar, they speak to the kids in Yiddish, and
You're
the
right.
kids speak to each other in Yiddish, and that's their mother tongue. That's their mama lashon.
You're right, and they have. I mean, it's just like in English.
Yeah.
Also, you're comparing,
Yeah.
Yiddish. Some of the ways like certain words are in and are
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
or ancient, but also sometimes you talk to someone with a southern drawl.
Oh, that's right.
You
There's
say,
a
well, they're speaking
Hungarian
English.
Yiddish.
Hello,
Yeah,
there's 50 states, United States.
Right, and they're different.
And
I have a Brooklyn accent, and there were people will use it R. People would make fun of me. My it was Roger Barnes. In Brooklyn, the R's come out. They come out in Harvard too. There's a play, Park Your Car in Harvard Yard. So the R's are out in certain. Jimmy Carter. He didn't say Carter. In fact, when he met with, it's funny, when he met with the President Sadat, he emphasized the R so much as President Carter and Mr. Begin. And so when Carter wouldn't use the R's at all, he was emphasizing. One of the best Englishes in terms of an Israeli was Abba Eben. He had that super, super nice sound. In fact, Netanyahu has a better English, theoretically, sound than Jimmy Carter. It's a southern accent. It's not bad, and even President Kennedy, you didn't hear the R's. And it's the same thing with Yiddish, the different accents and so on.
So even though they were very closely to, but you have that in English. That's people say it's funny. Well, you have that in English.
Yes.
And so that's what Joe's trying to tell us in Hungary. They had a little different of an accent.
Right.
And sometimes it's like just
and
like
there's
I
also
say with a southern
Galcian and
drawl.
Litvak, it's a git, it's a gut, the same thing. You say tomato, I say tomato, git and gut. And where my mother was, she had a different accent than her father because it was like in northern Poland. Some would say git and some would say gut. And so there was a joke. You say tomato, I say tomato. So, yeah. But there is a standard Yiddish, and the local regional accents are legitimate. One thing was all jokes about Litvaks and Galiciana. They had a different little accent, but it was the same language.
Well, you have a lot of things on the table, maybe to show people. Maybe you want to show, or we have a tape recorder.
Okay.
Yiddish,
Here's the thing.
pick it up and maybe
My
show it to
grandfather was
people.
a scribe in the court of the Gerer Rebbe, and when my brother was running for an election, said Einikel means grandchild from Gewesene Sofa von Gerer Heuf. That means the Gerer Rabbi's court, a candidate for civil court Richter in Brooklyn. It was like Gabriel Krausman's a candidate, and there was a picture of my grandfather who was very religious, and he was a scribe. So he'd send cards on Rosh Hashanah of with his script, and he also did Torahs and mezuzahs and tefillin. So that was one of his many jobs. He also was a mole, which is a circumciser. It was also as a Masada Kedushin, means he performed weddings. And from all the things, my mother said, mit alle Glickenheit nicht gekannt machen a Leben. That means with all his talents, he didn't make a living. He had 12 kids, 9 were girls. And if you have a daughter, you have to have a dowry. So if you're not making money and you have 9 daughters, it reminds you of the thing, who was the play with
Fiddler on the Roof.
Fiddler on the Roof. So that was Tsaris. Sadly enough, he died just before the Holocaust in '39, and the whole family was there. Meaning he had 4 daughters and a son left there with a lot of. So everyone who was there was lost in the Holocaust. And then my mother said it was fortunate he died in '39, just before the Germans marched in.
Yeah.
Had he lived, in fact, there's a great poem by my uncle that he's speaking from the grave, and he's saying, how come the kids are not coming to visit me, Phil Tisha B'Av, and how come they're not coming to the grave? So he takes a bird, very nice poem, sad, and he sends the bird out with why aren't they coming to visit? And then the bird comes back, and the letter is not opened. In other words, because they're all dead. A moving poem, and it's in one of his books. Well, that's what happened, as you all know, to the people who stayed behind in the backwater in the Holocaust. Most of them were lost. And my mother said it was a blessing that he died just before they entered, because he would have gone with them. Everyone who was there in that shtetl, in a little village called Mishnitz, was killed.
What about your mother? Obviously she got out before the
She
war.
came here in the 20s. My father actually came here from Palestine. He moved to France, then he moved to Palestine, and he came here from Palestine to France, and my father came here just before the Depression. And he was already older, and he had a thick Yiddish accent, and he spoke to my mother only in Yiddish. On my father's side, there were some survivors of the Holocaust who came in '50. They didn't speak English at all. By that time, I could talk to them in my zerbrochen or my broken Yiddish. My Yiddish improved since then. I mean, I didn't go to the Oxford class till '85. These people came over in the '50s. So by the time of '85, I knew a little more.
It's hard to learn a language when you're older. That was pretty
Yeah.
I guess you had basics.
Yeah, I had
young.
a little, because I heard it all the time from my parents, but I wouldn't answer. I say, Yossel laughing the tear, Yossel for Bakto. But I knew what, in other words, when they spoke to each other, I knew everything. And they would never, but I would answer in English, and they would speak to me in mixed. So that's what, and I think about the interest in my uncle's stuff. I've translated some of it. I've translated some.
Is that good, actually? You say you're
I'm not an
advanced.
expert, but I've translated. I have here, this is the Yiddish League book, and it's called Jugendruf. And here was a poem that I translated from English into Yiddish. For that, I needed a dictionary. And it's a very touching poem by a guy who was the professor of English at, at some college, I don't even remember. And he wrote a book about the Holocaust that I'm glad that his father came to America, because he hadn't come. After kneeing by cave on my knees by my father's grave, and he's thanking him for coming to America, because had he stayed in Poland where he was born, he would have been dust. So, and he says, Dank Jossel Krausman for übersetzen das Lied auf Yiddish. So thanks to Joe Krausman for translating this to Yiddish. But most of the translation I do, my Yiddish isn't that great, is from Yiddish to English. But this is one I did, and was in this Jugendruf, and that's David Zeiger. It's called in English, On My Knees at Your Grave. That's.
You want to read it now? Can you translate it for us? That'd be interesting. Not that long of a poem.
Well,
It's not that long.
Pardon my Yiddish. Okay.
Oh,
let me see if I
please
can-
translate it also. right
Okay.
here. Let's hear some Yiddish.
Ich seh dich ein dein Unterhemd in Schwitzschap auf Rivington Street, Rivington Gas he uses, eingebeugen, pressing Kleider. I see you on Rivington pressing clothes.
Which is Lower East Side.
Yeah.
It was famous.
Arbeiten alle Shore, working ever geschwind, und ich heb an weinen, ich will kriechen in dein Hand, aber kann nicht heben, das Pressel sich gemacht, wie mehr wollten sich nicht gekannt. He sees him sweating, working. It's beg ich sich herab bei dein Käfer. Now I'm getting down on my knees by your grave. Und kalten März-Tag 25 Jahre nach dein Tod. It's a cold March day, 25 years after your death. Gedei zu bedenken vermachen die Nessia von kleinem Städtel. Thanking you for taking the journey from the small village. And here you see Nessia is a Hebrew word and so on. So that's the word for a trip in Parliament in 1914. In 1914 verlassen die Mama und ihr Eifele zu kommen später nach der Milchama. Left behind and then they came later after the war. Ich lebe, weil ich bin da geboren. I'm living because I was born here. Geboren in Sicherwald, gestorben dort. If I was there, I would be dead. Mit 60 Jahren zurück in Gaskammer. I would have died in a gas. A schwach, kranker Jungel wird visual Reich would become like smoke. Okay, du hast gekannt schreiben dein Namen auf Englisch. Du hast gekannt schreiben dein Namen auf Englisch, aber gerät und geschrieben nur Kitchen Yiddish. And it means he didn't speak the perfect Yiddish. Ein Brief zu deiner Brüder, jetzt lerne ich sich zu lernen und schreiben Yiddish. Now I'm learning Yiddish for dir auf Vater Mammen. Ich ankegen gerade Peretz, Shalom Aleichem, these are great Yiddish writers, und Sutzgewe, jetzt, wenn mein Yiddish is azai gut wie eins. Now, because he came to Yiddish, fuck, he was studying Yiddish. Ich kann reden zu die 6 Millionen Wissendig. I can talk to the 6 million now, because that was their language. Als ich wollte gestorben mit sie. Well, I could speak to them because now I learned the language. Kämpfen dich mit dem Bund in Warschauer Ghetto, wenn nicht du mehr seinen zwischen Geläumes deins und meins. So basically, what he's saying, thanks for leaving, because if you would have stayed, I would have been dust and so on. And what do I know him from? He came to Yiddish, he studied Yiddish, and he was a professor of English. And so that was about, and remember, on my knees by your grave. That's it, off mine.
You know, Joe, it's very interesting, but the trouble is we're almost out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have so much. Maybe we'll have to ask you to come again in part 2 to explain a lot more
I didn't know it went so fast.
And we're having a good time. So, in any case, Joe, I want to thank you for all the your Yiddish teaching.
I didn't play anything.
Well, we'll come back again and we'll talk again a little bit about, you have Yiddish tunes for us, and stay tuned. And thank you very much for teaching us about the Yiddish.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here, and I wish everyone, we have a big holiday now, a Lashana Tova, and a happy and a healthy year with gesund and alles Guts, with health and all good things.
Thank you.